Hello everybody and welcome back to Grimdark Minis. Today we're going to be painting up the Addicted Dredger from Mezgike Miniatures. Get your brushes ready and let's go. So we're going to go ahead and start this paint job off with a really light zenithal prime. We don't need to push our values too high here, we just want a gentle transition from blacks to gray. For our armor panels, we're going to base coat with a dark silver. Alternatively, if you want to use something like lead belcher, that'll work out just fine. We want to just focus on getting an even base coat on our panels, the syringe, and the power pack on his back. Once we've got our dark silver done, we're going to base coat our trim with a copper color. This for the moment is going to look super bright, but don't worry, we've got a lot of other weathering steps that are going to dull this out and make it more look like it's been hiding under the waves for a few centuries. It'll bring it all together, make it stand out a lot less. For this, just make sure you get your brush nice and saturated with paint, and just gently drag it across the surface. You're going to be able to catch those kind of trim edges without impacting the dark silver base coat that we already established. Now onto our flesh tones. The Dredge are sickly bloated creatures that have been mutated by the dark forces on their planet and left underwater to change over time. To show this, we want to go ahead and use a blue-black as the shadow color. I want to convey that this is the first time these guys are emerging from the water, and they're doing so at night. So a dark and cool tone is a great start for this. We are then going to wet blend a pallid witch flesh to bring a really desaturated skin tone into the mix. The trick with this wet blending is to layer out the darker color onto the lower side of all of our surfaces, and then our highlight color can then be put into our upper side, and then we can bring both of them together, kind of pushing and pulling to create this smooth gradient in the middle. It's a quicker way to do it that doesn't involve a whole lot of effort or time, just needs some practice. The Addicted Dredger is a marine charged with keeping the worst plagues of their cursed sea. Their vials are locked away in vaults at the deepest section of the sea and protected by these marines. After a marine spends enough time staring into the glowing liquids, they eventually give in and inject themselves with the concoctions. If they survive the first pass, they become the Legion's berserkers. And shortly, we're going to use an OSL effect on their vials that I think really brings this piece together. To highlight our skin, we're going to use a volumetric highlight. This just means that we are painting based on our volumes and highlighting the area that will be most affected by the light. While it may seem counterintuitive, you do want to bring your highlight all the way to the crease in areas where light will be touching. In the Games Workshop painting methodology, you would get a wash into there and that's going to dull it all out. While that gives you a quick result, it's not necessarily realistic. Instead, keep your darker color just on the obscured edge of the upper fold. To finish up our highlight and give it some texture, we are going to stipple on some slightly watered down pallid witch flesh. This is going to brighten up our skin and give it just a little bit of variation without taking too large of a step up in brightness. To stipple, get a brush with a good tip and then gently push just the tip into your raised surfaces, over and over, creating a lot of dots. For the plant growths, we are going to keep this really muted. These bits are going to add a lot to the mini in terms of height and different types of textures, but they aren't going to be the star of the show. For this, we are going to just base coat with a Castellan green. For skulls, leather details, and then the tops of the vials, I'm going to base coat in a Rhinox hide. Once again, we're going muted here, so in the coming steps, we are just going to take gradual steps up in brightness, but never push it to a true highlight, keeping everything a little bit in the background, in the shadows, compared to the skin and the armor, and then our eventual OSL. We're going to use Xandri Dust as our unifying color for our skulls, leather details, and barnacle growths. When doing this, I mixed in Xandri Dust to the parts' respective base coat color, and then color them up, slowly working in small color jumps, and not really ever reaching a pure Xandri Dust except on the very edges and corners. Let's go ahead and add some texture and variation to our armor. For this, we're going to use Typhus Corrosion. This technical paint we will apply using a sponge, and it's going to leave behind just small grains that generate just a bit of corroded texture and color. Now for our washes and weathering. We want to use these to shade, but not to flood anywhere. So we really want to babysit them and spread them around as we're using them. We're going to use Drakenhof Nightshade for our blue, and then Beeltan Green for our green shades. With the Drakenhof, we're going to focus these around the muscle groupings, barnacles, and then the armor. Once again, making sure that we aren't letting this pool anywhere. Really want to just use this to bring our flesh tones together and then to tint our armor for weathering. So just make sure you're pushing it around before it fully dries and before it gets set, just to make sure we're not pooled. For the green, I want to focus this on the deep folds of skin as well as anywhere that the armor meets skin, giving it an otherworldly hue. For rust effects, we're going to be using Dirty Down. In my opinion, it's the best type of product for this thing. Just want to make sure that it's really well shaken. It ends up separating a ton when it's just sitting idle. So get a bit of water on your brush with it, and then you can spread it wherever you want rust to collect. Areas that we did the corrosion, also chips and scratches in the armor that we've created. To continue our weathering, we're going to go ahead and water down some Castellan green into a glazed consistency. This can then be applied wherever we think algae might have collected. This not only acts as another good tint for our armor, but brings our armor and plant growths together color-wise. And to finish off our armor, we can take a small, scraggly brush and just do a very light dry brushing of silver. The aim of this isn't to increase the brightness or add in any color variety, it's mostly just to define all of the edges, helps the viewer kind of pick out and choose where the 3D objects are. For this tabard, we're going to go with a desaturated and neutral tone. To do this, we're going to start with Mournfang Brown and then gradually increase it bit by bit by mixing in Fenrisian Gray to it, eventually ending up with kind of this gray-brown tone. For coral, I wanted to bring in a little bit of color. I honestly wasn't quite sure how to do it. Looking at the model already, we already have some orangey tones through our rust, so I ended up going with that. Mixed Jacaro orange and blue black, and then slowly added in more orange to highlight as we went up in brightness and tone. That way, it still kind of felt like coral in the way that you always see the pictures of colorful stuff, but it blends into the kind of muted tones as well as the greenish blue hues that we've got going on. Now to start our OSL effect. With OSL, you want whatever is emitting the light to be the brightest portion of the model. So that's going to be our virus tubes. To do this, I just did a quick base coat of white scar. Just really want to make sure that we don't generate any texture here. We just want it to be a flat white. And to start on with the airbrush of our OSL, I watered down some white ink and then applied it. I wanted to create the area that this glow will be touching without going full opacity into white. This creates the base for our glow, but it makes sure that it doesn't get too bright apart from the actual source. So for this, we just want to start in pretty heavy around the actual object, within, a 1/10 of an inch to it, just get it fairly white, and then as it goes out, just slowly lower the amount of white ink that we're spraying into that area. Now for our pale teal glow, same as the Dredgelord from a few videos ago, we're going to use Aethermatic Blue. Once again, this is going to be out of the airbrush. This is going to help with a smooth and gradual application versus layering with a brush. It's a lot more subtle, and with this step, remember that less is more. You can always go back in and add more later, but it's much harder to go back once you've overdone it. So take this one nice and slow. And to re-brighten our source, we're just going to go ahead and do a light glaze of white ink over each tube, making sure to go along the entire circumference of it, not just one side or it'll look a little funny. And to re-brighten our source, we're just going to go ahead and do a light glaze of white ink over each tube, making sure to go along the entire circumference of it, not just one side or it'll look a little funny. To finish our model, I went ahead and dry brushed a little bit of sandy dust over our base to create this dark and nighttime sand. Then we're going to apply some UV cure resin to create our water effect. To finish our model, I went ahead and dry brushed a little bit of sandy dust over our base to create this dark and nighttime sand. Then we're going to apply some UV cure resin to create our water effect. And there we have it. Our addicted dredger is complete. This is a fantastic model with, in my opinion, a lot of opportunity for painters to do cool things with. We stuck to our muted palette, but still ended with a really interesting result with a lot of different color varieties. The OSL contrasts really nicely against the muted tones and makes them pop as our army's accent color. Well, that's going to be all for today's video. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing, and then also give me a comment if you would try out this paint job for yourself and or any suggestions you might have. Alright everybody, I will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one.